Red 2 standing by, all 4 lit and in the green. Welcome back to Donkey Kong 64, and there is Lanky's idle animation. So I've sort of rambled my way through water levels a bit and panicked through bonus barrels. We've got some more stuff to do with On Guard in here, so I'll find the box right behind me. And of course, a good opportunity to talk about pirates. Lots of people like pirates. There's often a debate as to whether they're better than ninjas. That is all up to personal preference, of course. I do have a tendency to prefer pirates because of certain card games. But they've permeated pop culture. They've always been there, in a sense. There's generally been something interesting. Pirate movies have been around for quite some time. There are always those stories of swashbuckling along the way. Tales like Treasure Island, with one of the most iconic pirates, Long John Silver. You had the old movie Captain Blood, starring Errol Flynn, the Tasmanian actor. Interestingly enough, Captain Blood would be borrowed as a nickname for the legendary Richmond footballer Jack Dyer, who was as hard as they came. Jack was incredibly tough, but a particularly good bloke. Not the most articulate per se. Jack could perhaps be described as Braveheart for his capacity for slaughtering English, but he was a genuinely well-meaning bloke, a bit old-fashioned in his approach to footy, but... Gold Banana, and On Guard is going to space again. But yeah, generally a very good player, regarded as a legend of the club and incredibly tough. Never won one of the league best and fairests, which always prompted Jack to observe that the Brownlow Medal, said award, went to the greatest, quote-unquote, the greatest milksop. But it was all a bit of a joke. There was a lot of mangling of English, some very interesting moments in the TV show he hosted with fellow football stars Lou Richards and Bob Davis, and a really, really good playing career that was hard and uncompromising, which got him that pirate-inspired nickname. We've had... Well, pirate movies actually weren't that popular for some time after the failure of Cutthroat Island, which I think starred Gina Davis and somebody, I've forgotten who else was in it. I don't really know that much about it, but to be honest, the only pirate movie anyone really seems to have much interest in is Pirates of the Caribbean. And that is understandable, because that was going to be a very different story until Johnny Depp got involved. The rest is history after that one. They had a breakout into character on their hands, and they did a pretty good job with Barbossa as well. I'm a bit biased because an Australian actor is involved. Basically, the first movie works really, really well and is a very enjoyable swashbuckling romp with a bit of a homage to the old days of pirate movies. The second one does work pretty well. It's sort of more lore building and things like that, a bit more of a focus on Jack Sparrow and so on. The third one, depending on who you ask, it may or may not be as strong, but at the very least, it's a really, really fun excuse for watching Johnny Depp and Jeffrey Rush trying to out-ham one another. And that on its own is enough for me to enjoy it. But aside from that, there hasn't really been a lot. I think there was Muppet Treasure Island, which was a bit of a spoof, and it was quite well regarded. Billy Connolly had a role in that, and he regarded it with great delight, noting that he was the only person to die in a Muppets movie. But really, apart from that, there hasn't really been that much piratical content outside of the Pirates of the Caribbean films in recent times, because Cutthroat Island failed so heavily. But pirates will pop up in all sorts of things. You might get a lot of pirate-themed things in trading card games. For me, the notable experience of pirates winds up being with the Cardfight Vanguard trading card game, which features the Grand Blue clan, Undead Pirates. It's one of my specialty clans, admittedly. It's the one I play the most and the one I have the strongest connection with. Not necessarily because I am undead, nor am I a pirate. But it's interesting how the aesthetic of Grand Blue has changed over time. There was something of a general undead feel in the idea of necromancy in the original cards, which were led by King of Demonic Seas Basskirk, who sort of looked like a homage to Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean. A fairly useful unit with a difficult-to-use skill that could, in a pinch, wind up filling your field with units from the drop zone, which is basically the graveyard. Later on, more and more Grand Blue units, which could revive things, would appear so that you actually had more options for the boss cards. There's a very different vibe between Basskirk and the second sort of boss card for Grand Blue, which was Ice Prison Necromancer Casitas. The main one, probably the most famous one, has been Vampire Princess of Nightfog, Night Rose. Night Rose sort of showed a change in the general style of Grand Blue. Where is the camera? It was sort of under her leadership as such, it's sort of a focus on call them creatures of the night as such. You've got ghosts, you've got vampires, you've got skeletons. The overall feeling is a bit less sinister than usual. It wasn't... There was sort of very different styles of undead, as it were. Alright, Kremlin Kosh. Let's give it a go. Basically, spray and pray, my usual style. Because we don't know where the shots are going, really. So yeah, basically, Grand Blue sort of varied in style. They had a few sort of more fun supernatural creatures along the way, and things weren't quite taken seriously. If you wanted a bit of fan art, it was worth noting that the vampires that made to up a lot of clan boss units, such as Night Mist, who went from a fairly basic unit in the first incarnation to essentially becoming the head of Grand Blue in the story lore. So you had him being pretty much standard pretty boy design, but a lot of strength to back it up. Night Rose is very beautiful as well. And you have quite a few other fairly good looking and easy on the eye units for the undead. Also Grand Blue foil cards are much better sparkly vampires than anything Twilight related ever will be. But cheap shots aside, I will point out that Grand Blue's aesthetic has sort of changed a bit again in its sort of successes in the Stoicheia Nation for the current format of Vanguard. But most of the time, when it comes to Grand Blue, their strategy has been revive units from the drop zone and sort of provide defensive options that way. Because that way you don't have to call units from your hand in order to wind up getting a full field, because that serves as your guard as well. Being able to revive their units, some units had skills that allowed them to retire another unit and revive themselves from the drop zone, but often it was down to your boss cards and the combos you could have. As the game went on, Grand Blue got the ability to just revive a few units, and then had mass revival skills, which also allowed them to conserve their hand and dish out a fair bit of damage along the way as well. They could sort of do hit and run skills with the hollow ability, like temporary necromancy. You revived them, but they essentially went to the drop zone at the end of the turn, which made it very difficult for decks that focused on field control to actually hurt Grand Blue. However, some of those field control decks got skills based on being able to attack the attack cards in the drop zone, which was one clan in particular that always made for a terrible matchup for Grand Blue. Some of them gained effects based on if your opponent had fewer or no rear guards. And the Starfish just beat me up. Now we have to fight a very difficult camera in 3D space and actually do it a little bit easier than I thought. You had to... Wait. Well, it looked like it swam through the wall anyway. But that could have just been me. But yeah, basically, Grand Blue has... It's had kind of an interesting time because it's very strong. It can set up its defenses and it can generally attack pretty well. And its units disappearing in the old format meant that it had a really good time sort of protecting itself. So it was a pretty strong clan overall. This could be a bit interesting. But of course it did have those clear-cut weaknesses along the way, and the decks that got field control skills in the old format that actually let them rip cards out of the opponent's hand, which was kind of a no-no because, well, Vanguard is very hand-focused, and because it's your means of defense as well as calling units, so they basically sort of decided, okay, this is a bit of a wash, let's reset things. When they wound up doing that, Grand Blue went back to various revival skills along the way and actually got a bit of power based on cards in the drop zone, and they probably had one of the most useful beat sticks in the entire game in the form of Dragon Undead Skull Dragon. In the standard and in the original and G series format, Skull Dragon was a fairly unremarkable unit. It was useful, it could revive itself, but it had to retire a grade 2 or higher unit. There's a lot to explain, you'll probably have to look a few things up yourself. It also got a little bit of power when it attacked, but it retired as soon as it attacked. The new one got to retire itself as soon as it attacked as well, but it also gained 2,000 power for each card in the drop zone during your turn. So, as the game went on, this thing was kind of ready to just punch face repeatedly. It was an incredibly good unit. Wait, that's a tag barrel, so where's Mini Monkey? There it is. So, now you are supposed to go into here before you go into the treasure caves. We'll swim through here. But yeah, Grand Blue often had a lot of issues in the early days with mass revival. We might wind up meeting a mermaid who, perhaps somewhat surprisingly for games the era, not sure how they got away with it, but she appears to be fairly stacked, just like Candy. So, swim up to the mermaid and we'll... So, her pearls have been stolen and locked them in a giant treasure chest. We know where that is. Well, helping out actually does get us a gold banana, so of course... I mean, it's just good to help people out. The fact that there's a gold banana involved is pretty much a bonus, so... Now that I mention it, well, it's obviously big enough for the mermaid to get out. But yeah, sometimes you wonder, is it just that the mermaid's really small because we have to be Mini Monkey to get in here? There's a lot of space warping magic at work. Maybe the mermaid can use Mini Monkey. Hands up if you saw that coming. Because I should have. Except I didn't, because the camera turned around. Okay, so I'm beginning to think we've done pretty much everything we can with the water level lowered. So, let's see now. Let's see. Let's raise the water level. Actually, no, I think there's a couple of things we have to do in the treasure cave while the water level is low. It's either that or it has to not run off the edge. We'll have to wind up getting everything sorted out when the water level is high over there. There's one more switch near here, isn't there? No, there aren't any more switches here. But we can at least go and wind up retrieving those pearls. So yeah, early on, Grand Blue was sort of maybe some units revive themselves. Some units might wind up reviving others as the focal unit. But there wasn't really a lot for them. Grand Blue wasn't actually focused on that much, which is kind of sad. We've got more Diddy Bananas. I think we've got some Diddy Bananas down by the area where the mechanical fish comes out, and we'll get to the problems with that later on. But yeah, Grand Blue really didn't have that much for some time. Until set 6 of the G era, it didn't really have a lot of support, and the support it got in the Legion era was glossed over. But when Night Rose turned up, fortunes changed around for Grand Blue and it got some very powerful revival units. Being able to mass revive turned into a very, very effective skill for Grand Blue. It was probably one of the strongest clans and can still be very consistent because of its defensive setup. In the V series, it was given the protect markers, because one of the problems with Grand Blue was that it sometimes has to mill its own cards to get fodder in the drop zone for its effects. So they were made protect-based units. They essentially got sentinel cards that allowed them to block attacks as special markers, because they'd wind up losing them. But then Grand Blue got the ability to basically trade in cards from the drop zone, which made them a lot stronger. Basically being able to tailor your hand with cards from the drop zone shored up their defensive capacity really well. They couldn't necessarily draw cards particularly well, but their big advantage was that they could pretty much punch face really easily by reviving things with Casitas and later Night Rose, because those units, their old bosses made a comeback. They could basically revive as needed, get some really good units out of things, and just dish out a lot of damage. So the fact that they couldn't really replenish their hand too well under normal circumstances was compensation for the fact that they could basically hit hard and defend well. So they sort of went from strength to strength, but they kind of had the same game plan, which was get things into the drop zone, shore up your defenses, call on Skull Dragon, and just punch face repeatedly. Not bad, but also a bit stagnant at times. I mean, they were very good on the offense, but at the same time, okay, wait for that to go up. But at the same time, a lot of decks in the V era tended to get a bit stagnant because they really had one game plan. So once you'd done that, it was kind of it. It was kind of your strategy, but you could use a bit of toolboxing as well, because you could call units back from the drop zone. How did we... Thank you. Anyway. We swim forward. We center the camera and clams. Giant clams. Tiny's in a jam. In a giant clam. Is that how the lyric goes anyway? Oh. So, we have to retrieve the 5 pearls from these clams, and then we can get back and see the mermaid. They are also mildly horrifying. And also you'll get that little glitch where they wind up going black sometimes. Black Pearl seems like a really good pirate idea. The very different music doesn't quite help too. At least for some people getting a bit spooked by this. But yeah, overall, Grand Blue had some really good fortunes overall, but their aesthetic got a little bit softer in some ways. It wasn't quite as, well, sort of stereotypical undead as such. Some of them did show that off, but a lot of them were sort of fairly friendly approaches. Then we got to the current era, the Overdress era, which has a number of different situations, because the units aren't actually set up by nation as opposed to the old clans, but the aesthetics of Grand Blue are still very much there in their boss card Mysterious Reign Spiritualist Zorga. Zorga can revive units, but can also utilize the Alchemagic ability. The game is focused on various order skills in the new incarnation. These are basically like your spell cards in Magic, let's say. And then there are Blitz orders, which also serve as hand traps, and set orders, which serve as your Yu-Gi-Oh! Style field spells. Basically, Zorga's Alchemagic ability allows him to stitch the effect of one order in the drop zone onto another order being played by binding it. It's all but stated that Zorga's style of resurrection, and in fact probably Casitas's as well, since I get a very different vibe from Casitas compared to Basskirk and Night Rose. Their vibe is basically that they're doing... It's the darker side of necromancy. It's not sort of, oh, this is cute and fun, let's revive our friends and have fun with various sort of creatures of the night as such. What I imagine Casitas is doing, and what it's pretty clearly stated it's all but stated Zorga is doing, is they're essentially stitching together undead abominations. They're basically just cobbling together creatures from corpses. And in general, just making all sorts of macabre monstrosities. There's a very different vibe to Casitas, especially since in the later part of the first format, when the Link Joker clan and its reverse effect was introduced, Casitas went looking for power and ultimately wound up getting involved with reverse because Casitas wanted more power. Basically, Casitas is one nasty piece of work. And I can easily imagine Casitas pretty much stopping at nothing to create an army of extremely sinister patchwork undead, all sorts of strange and twisted creatures. I think the idea behind Casitas in lore was that he was locked away in some sort of prison. Now, there is one more banana I can do with Tiny, so I'm not... 65. So, we can get Tiny's next banana, and then we will be able to move on, maybe grabbing a couple of banana balloons while we're at it. Fortunately, Tiny doesn't really care too much about the water level. That's a big advantage. Anyway, yeah, Casitas, it's pretty much implied, but Zorga, it's definitely stated that Zorga is really, really messing around with the darker side of sort of necromancy, not sort of the cute and fun side of things. If there is such a cute thing as a cute and fun side of necromancy, at least the sort of friendlier, let's have fun with ghosties style of thing that Night Rose had going for her, since she was often connected with units of the ghosty sub-clan. Things like that. It's just very different presentations and some very sinister ones as well. So I really do just like the overall aesthetics of Grand Blue, and I prefer playstyles that, like Grand Blue can be, are a little bit more technical. There's a little more precision involved in some of its plays. You have to know when to make all your moves. You have to be very careful. I don't think there are actually any bananas in here, but there are crystal coconuts, which we do need. So, yeah, basically, it's very interesting seeing how everything is presented when it comes to the Grand Blue clan. Those differing styles make for some really interesting experiences. Anyway, get into the barrel. Or not. Okay, you heard it here first. It's not camera perspective. I'm just bad at swimming. Okay. Get the timing right. Now, if I get it right here... Oh, it nearly worked! There we go. Nearly cheesed it. But with the right timing, you can pull that off pretty easily. And there we are. Tiny just needs some bananas and then we're good to go. Lanky's already got the banana medal, so let's raise that water level. I'll go back and do that with Tiny. But yeah, swimming has never quite been my forte. It's not that I'm crap at it. I did alright when it came to swimming lessons, I just never really pursued it because I don't live near the beach. I don't see much point in it because I'm not really going swimming in a lot of fancy locations as such. There's going to the pool, but that's about it. We did have a pool, but the support struts basically rusted through, so we had to get rid of that. It got turned into a garden area, basically, and it's probably a little hard to just think of things without that. It's been like that for quite some time. Anyway. I don't mind swimming, but I don't really do that much of it. I did obviously get swimming lessons when I was a kid. And interestingly enough, I can say hand on heart, not making it up, I actually had swimming lessons with an Olympic gold medalist. The swimmer in question was Faith Leach, who competed at the 1956 Olympics. Part of the relay team with Dawn Fraser. That was actually a bit of a surprise, and I didn't really cotton on to that at first. But it was just... well, it's a very nice surprise, really, and it's just a nice little touch. Maybe I could have been a really good swimmer, who knows? But when it comes to the water, I tend to prefer just sort of pottering around doing my own thing, as opposed to sort of anything really serious when it comes to swimming. I don't really like going to the beach, even though it's kind of a necessity because I live in Australia and it's just one of those done things. Is there a banana? Ah, there's some bananas for Diddy up there, but is there anything for Donkey Kong? Need to check over the other side. There's the rocket barrel. Just too high. Rightio, so we'll probably ramp this up by going into the barrel blast core. Or no, we'll actually wrap it up by doing this. Let's get on inside that lighthouse. Yeah, I prefer going to the beach in winter. I don't like crowds, so going in summer is not a thing. And I prefer to get out early and then just hide inside. I am not an overly social person. Would have laughed if my orange wound up killing another clump somewhere along the way. And there we are, another coin. Yeah, we are really loaded for coins. Clump's come quite a long way from just being a basic enemy that Diddy couldn't jump on, and that was about it for special tricks. Clump is respawning very quickly. Anyway, we have to get up here. We have to fight the camera. Up we go, and we get a platforming section that is strangely reminiscent of Mario 64 to the top of the tower in Womp's Fortress. Yeah, so I much prefer sort of walking along the beach when the weather is cool, going in my own time, my own pace, and basically seeing what I can find in terms of rock pools and things like that. I'm always sort of looking out for interesting little things here and there. Just little bits and pieces that might actually prove to be neat little curios here and there. Stuff like that, really. Okay, now if I'm careful... There. That's got that sorted, and I think there's a balloon? At least there was. I think it's a bit further down. But let's get on the footplate of that lever. And there we go. This will activate the lighthouse. And we also have a ship coming in, a little pirate ship that Chunky will have to explore. Yeah, that's pretty much it for water as far as I'm concerned. I don't mind having a look around to find things, but I'd still much rather just sort of take it all at my own pace and sort of have a bit of fun doing my own thing rather than actually sort of... Can I actually jump? Where is it? Notice how my oranges home in and theirs don't? Maybe that's a property of ripe oranges. Well, there we are, banana medal for DK. And one more gold banana to wrap up this. So, that'll do things for now. Till next time, this is Red 2, returning to base.